Hello, and welcome back to another episode by Grey Beyond Narratives. Today, we're starting a new segment known as Axis, and it will delve into global politics, covering topics ranging from shifting hegemonies to proxy wars, with a primary focus on current and potential superpowers. Today's discussion will revolve around the Russian conflict in Ukraine. Russian Security Council Deputy Chairperson Dmitry Medvedev hinted at the possibility of Russian seizing Kyiv in the future, while also outlining potential territorial ambitions in Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin recently held a meeting with leaders from the Commonwealth of Independent States and Republic of Tatarstan, including Rustam Minikhanov. Reports suggest that Minikhanov's visit to Iran may have involved a discussion on Russo-Iranian defense cooperation, particularly in the Esfahan province, where key military sites are located. Additionally, Iran's involvement in establishing a drone manufacturing facility in Tatarstan Alabuga Special Economic Zone adds significance to Minikhanov's visit. On February 21st, Ukrainian forces successfully launched an attack on a Russian training ground in occupied Kherson Oblast, resulting in significant casualties, according to Colonel Natalia Humeniuk, spokesperson for the Ukrainian Southern Operational Command. Nearly 60 Russian servicemen were killed in the strike at the Podo Kalinivka training ground. In a show of support, Ukraine's European and Western allies are increasing their assistance. Denmark's Ministry of Defense announced a military aid package worth 1.7 billion Danish kroner, which includes various equipment and a 10-year bilateral security agreement. The UK is sending 200 Brimstone anti-tank missiles, while New Zealand pledged an aid package valued of 25.9 million New Zealand dollars for humanitarian aid and support for Ukraine's weapons acquisition and reconstruction effort. The German Bundestag approved additional military support, including long-range weapons system and ammunition, but rejected the provision of Taurus cruise missiles. Recently confirmed progress was made by Russian forces in the vicinity of Bakhmut and Avdiivka, delay in establishing Rosgvardia's first volunteer corps for remaining Wagner Group detachments was reported by a Russian insider source due to an ongoing rotation of former Wagner personnel in Africa. Independent Russian mail blogger Andriy Morozov allegedly took his own life on February 21st after refusing to comply with Russian military command's order to remove his report on high Russian casualty rates near Avdiivka. Alexei Navalny, the most prominent domestic opponent of Russian President Vladimir Putin, passed away after collapsing on Friday following a walk at the Polar Wolf Arctic penal colony where he was serving a 3-decade sentence, according to authorities. US President Joe Biden expressed his outrage and joined other Western leaders in condemning Russia for Navalny's death, attributing it to something that Putin and his thugs did. Navalny gained fame over a decade ago for exposing what he claims was widespread corruption and luxury among the crooks and thieves governing Putin's Russia. I'm sorry, this was a long introduction, but it was an introduction because it's been ongoing war and a lot has been happening. So I'm going to go to Shaji. Shaji.
Okay, thank you very much. Am I audible? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Am I audible? Okay, thank you very much. So I think you've explained pretty well in regards to what is happening locally in the region. I think with this series as well as with the entire conversation, we want to highlight how a kind of axis of disorder is emerging in terms of who has hegemony and who hasn't. And like you rightfully mentioned, that in specifically this week, there have been sanctions just as quick as today. A few hours ago, Biden instigated or announced an array of sanctions, which is a second round. Obviously, the first round failed. But this time round, they've also indirectly targeted India as well as China, as well as Iran as well. These are three other countries which have been named. But if we look at the previous week, what we see is like there was a rare meeting between Kim Jong of North Korea, who went on a train all the way up to Russia, and he met with Putin to sign an arms deal. And at the same time, what we've seen is that even though there have been various things coming up and cropping up in regards to what's been happening at all these fronts, what we're seeing is different players emerging from all around the world. Whether it is the continent of Africa, where in Burkina Faso you've got a leader who's outrightly supporting Russia as well as China. You've got South Africa. You've got the Argentinian president threatening the UK. All in this week. So, hence this subject. This is closely related to the conflict, which happens to be Russia and Ukraine, as rightfully so pointed out. But there's much more to this. And this conflict is kind of becoming a global trigger point for namely Russia, China versus almost the West, namely United States, United Kingdom, and very directly now the EU. So with that, I'll go to Aditya, who's come to our stream after a long time. Welcome back. So we'll ask for his initial opinions in regards to how it's being perceived within India and elsewhere, and what his personal opinion is, and then we'll move over to Furkan. And then Sid, and let's begin the conversation. Go ahead, Aditya.
Uh, Thank you, Shah and Maham, for the brief introduction to the issue at hand. So if I have to talk about, like, how it is viewed in India, I think India probably, like, Indian, at least the government thinks they have a very smart strategy that they are using in this conflict. At least that's their belief, but with more and more passing of the time, India is realizing it's not so easy to try and balance out this position that India has held for the last 2.5 years. It's getting more difficult to walk this tight, narrow space. So what has been happening is, as the conflict started, India's position was that, it's not going to take sides, which in a way is like almost impossible. Like, you can initially pretend that, you're not favoring one uh, at the space of the other, but everybody knows that, when push comes to shove, you have to make that decision. And probably India thinks that, India, if try to bring in the idea of the global south together, then somehow, like, India can resist the temptation of choosing the sides between, like, the emerging power, which is China, along with support of Russia, and the other, like, current hegemon, which is the Western world, America, and the European partners. So India somehow believes that, if India tries to bring this block together of the so-called global south, which it doesn't exist, to be honest. Let's be honest, this doesn't exist. It's something that, this idea has always stayed. During even the Cold War times, it was called the non-aligned movement or non-aligned partners. Nehru and few partners started this alliance, but it never had, like, complete autonomy. All the partners had somehow, like, one on another sides they were more inclined towards. So India's understanding currently is that they can walk this tightrope, with which with time India is realizing that it's not going to be easy. You want to do trade with the West, you want to export your material and your finished goods to the West. At the same time, you want to import cheap raw material and commodities from China, and import cheap discounted oil from Russia, and still be friends with both the sides. When they are with, like, every passing day they are become more and more hostile towards each other. I think, like, it's not a very sustainable model. Probably India's, like, government realizes that, or at least they realize it more than they did, like, probably 5 years ago, that it's not going to be so easy to walk this tightrope. Push comes to shove, I think, like, India will try to align with the Western world, since that's a place where, like, India's interest lies, and that's my, I think, my initial starting point. So it's not that easy, and, like, India's position currently is that we want to somehow balance this, but India's balance has been shifting towards the Western world, or the West, slightly in the last 1.5 years. Even if you listen to the Prime Minister's speeches in the last 1 to 2 years, it is a little more pro-Western than it is towards pro-Russia or China. It's pretty clear, yeah.
Aditya, I have a question. When you say it's shifting more towards the West again, and I can understand you're basically stating that, but I would like to ask, like, are there any particular statements or any particular moves? Because from what the globe is kind of envisaging, and what major media houses as well as analysts have been stating, is that there has been a significant amount of shift when it comes to India towards Russia, rather than the other way around. And if you look at, for example, the trade deals in terms of oil and whatnot and various other things, in India is like, even in terms of the BRIC conventions and all the conferences in regards to what's been going around between BRIC countries, what you're seeing again is that almost like India is trying to even get closer to China than it has been in the past, with Russia being almost like a mediator in the middle. So, and again, it's a very tricky situation, in my opinion, because India, on one side, naturally falls into that bracket of these emerging economies where China, Russia, uh, as well as South Africa and Brazil happen to be on one side, and then you've got uh, these issues with the other countries, namely the Western world, specifically the USA and United Kingdom and the EU, where they don't naturally align in terms of how they're progressing. So, what makes you think, and on what grounds are you making that statement? It would be interesting to know. Please go ahead.
So I believe, like, any person who has a in-depth knowledge of geopolitics will clearly tell you that India is more pro-West than it is pro-East, you can say. It's clearly, like, there are very clear telltale signs which completely and clearly proves that India is more pro-West. And let me give you a few examples. So after the war broke out in Ukraine, you can clearly see that, yes, India has bought a lot of oil from Russia, but it has never been a historical or traditional, like, buyer of Russian oil. India is only buying oil in such a large quantity because it's discounted. Like, before the conflict started, not more than 1% or even 0.5% of India's oil came from Russia. It's the only time it's coming from Russia is when it's very heavily discounted. And as we know that Western, like American, especially companies like Shell and other big giants are like exploring more and more oil in the Americas. Like recently, they discovered oil in Ghana. They're doing projects in Africa, and as they start producing more oil, India will be buying a lot more oil from the Western world, and it's a temporary arrangement. Then again, if you look at what is the other major trade between India and Russia, it's weapons, which America is tightening India's position as importer of the Russian, arms. So if you look at America has multiple times tried to block India's purchase of S-400, and they give India special permissions to import them, but it's not so open that India imports them. And the other reason India can has to continue buying arms from Russia is because India has been traditionally Russia has been a reliable partner of export of these arms to India since last 70 years, since the Cold War, right? So even for the repairs and everything, India needs the help of Russia, which America understands, and they want India to continue doing it, but slowly waver off that reliance from Russia and to more towards the Western world, which India is also doing. Also, if you look at the statements made by Narendra Modi, India's Prime Minister, in the last 2 years, he has spoken about India has called it a war, not a conflict. It has called this war in Ukraine. India has called for peace and negotiations, which only talks about what the Western world is proposing. So India has walked a tightrope, but if you see, Prime Minister Modi has been to many Western countries. He has been to countries in Europe. He has had a state visit to United States of America. But at the same time, if you look at India's foreign minister has regularly criticized actions of China and their infiltration into the Indian boundary. Indian Prime Minister hasn't visited Russia in a long time since the conflict broke out. India has talked about the global south, and if you talk about the BRICS organization, any serious person who analyzes the organization knows that BRICS is nothing more than uh, just like NATO is to United States of America. BRICS is what China's idea is to counter NATO. So the only reason India is a part of BRICS is so that it doesn't become a China only Eastern Bloc. Probably even America wanted India to be a part of BRICS so that they can balance out this organization better, make it a spineless organization so that India can weaken it, to be very honest, so that it doesn't become anything of substance. That's my understanding. And even a lot of Western analysts assume and think the same.
Okay, I understand where you're coming from, and we can later on discuss and elaborate more on that. I've noted that point. With that, I think we should go with the initial thoughts with Dr. Furqan, and then we'll move on and see where the discussion goes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chaji. I think after listening to what Aditya said and also the introduction, uh, I would say that whatever you call it, BRICS, Eastern Bloc, or whatever you would phrase it, uh, the Western Bloc has been very assertive in their thinking, what they think about the international relations, and whatever they want to exert, they have been very open and vocal about what they want. Uh, and they have uh, exerted their uh, will or ideas onto the East for quite some time, but I don't see the same coming from the other bloc, whether you call it BRICS or the Eastern Bloc. And with what Aditya said about India coming into BRICS, probably to weaken it. might be true, but like they are not doing anything. It might be sort of a threat for the G7, the West, but right now I don't see any opposition coming in from that bloc in any way or form. So I think it's just the Americans and their allies exerting what they want. Even if China is becoming a global player or a global power, coming in the first two, three countries in terms of economy and other resources and uh, whatnot. So, but then again, they are not coming up front in terms of looking for a conflict or exerting what they think is probably the new world order. So I know there is a versus the Russia versus the West or anything. The only country I see exerting or standing against the West is Russia, probably North Korea. Other than that, I don't see any world order changing in the near future. I would say. So those are my opening statements, Shaji. Over to
Uh,
you.
can I ask you a leading question so you can elaborate on that? Because when the conversation then is elaborated, it will be handy in those regards. I basically want to know when you basically state that it's just basically only Russia standing in between. Uh, and do you actually believe that it's going to be just one country against the other, or it's going to be a group of countries versus a group of countries creating situations all around the globe in continents all the way from Africa to Australasia to the regions like Middle East to be more specific, and then Americas and South America as well, where Argentina from nowhere has kind of spurted out in recent times. And same applies to North Korea. And then you've got the Central Asian countries kind of putting their head out. And then you've got situation on all sides of Iran as well now in recent times with Azerbaijan, Armenia, and then Afghanistan and that those side of things, and obviously not the subcontinent as well in the way we've just witnessed a definite regime change on behest of United States now. Otherwise, Imran Khan would not be in prison. So the establishment has kind of confirmed by prosecuting him. This is not an outside point. Now, there is no doubt he leaked the cipher. Hence, he's in prison. So, regime change by the United States in a country of my origin as well as yours. That's kind of been confirmed by the Pakistani establishment now. Um, do you see it as if there was and again in regards to the Pakistani elections, the United States, the EU, as well as the UK, they've said very competitive elections, so they support the regime change. What happened to democracy? There are various questions which can be asked. So again, so it boils down to: do you think it's just trigger point? Axis of disorder is occurring everywhere, or it's just one country versus the other, and there are not additional players in regards to that? Go ahead.
Uh, I think you, in a way, seconded what I said probably because, like the regime change in Pakistan, yes, it has been there. It was done. Khan claimed it, and then you explained how what the legal proceedings and where Khan is right now because of that. Uh, so there is one country, the US, exerting what it wills, and then it has a bloc, the Western bloc, as we call it, probably the G7, probably the G7, and they basically exert what they want in terms of international relations and geopolitics. But Uh, the other bloc, the Chinese, you named a few in South America, probably India. They probably say a lot, but when it's time to take sides or choose sides, they become very diplomatic in their affairs, and they don't choose sides. Probably uh, one of the reasons why Khan was like what happened with Khan was because he visited Russia and his inclination towards Russia during that conflict. And you see what happened. So I don't see the world order changing what it is right now, inclining towards the East or the BRICS, whatever you call it. It's just like they exert their, they sometimes say things, but the order is not going to change in the near future. That's what I foresee. And the only two countries I see who basically come up front with statements and in terms of international relations, like we saw Russia getting into Ukraine, that's Russia and North Korea.
How about, for instance, what do you think Turkey's role in this entire thing is? Because they're directly at war with Russia in 4 different countries as we speak.
They're directly involved with whom? Pardon?
With Russia in 4 different parts of the globe right now
Hmm.
in direct combat. So that namely being Syria and Armenia and Azerbaijan conflict and various other places, or Iran for that matter, who were supplying ammunition. Again, we've discussed Palestine and Israel on various occasions, and it wouldn't be incorrect to discuss it right now. And both wars are kind of interlinked in terms of supply of ammunition. So what basically occurred, Iranian ships were seized with ammunition headed for the Palestinian war, and various other places by the Americans. And now the Americans who've kind of seized them, they want to supply them to Ukraine, which is not allowed specifically under the Geneva Conventions, but they're looking for a loophole. So again, it's a very direct thing where Iranians were now supplying ammunition to the Russians, supplying ammunition to the Palestinians, the Chinese going and practicing naval practices in not just in the South Sea, but also the Mediterranean and the Middle East, all the way up till Africa. Um, Same with the Russians. So it seems to be a lot of hustle and bustle on the global front. If you look at it, it's the passiveness is gone. But before you answer that, I think we should go to Aditya. I also believe, like you do, that India seems to be a passive player or trying to be very passive in this entire thing. So if
One
for
one small comment on this before you go to Aditya. I think these are tiny pieces of the puzzle, small tidbits. When it comes to asserting on or taking sides, everyone goes shush. Most of the times, that's what happens. Yeah,
they were sure, who are you talking about? I didn't understand.
like every country, I have seen that. Like what happened with the Ukraine and Russia
Situation,
conflict. The major players, they went shush on
on,
Russia and Ukraine on choosing a side.
on what occasion, side of what?
Russia and Ukraine war.
Well, the Europeans were very directly supporting the Ukraine.
Yes,
The
yes,
West,
that's what I'm saying. The West was one block. The G7, they were like there.
the
They were
the
vocal on side. But the
the
other side, that the BRICS and the proposition is coming in, China and the BRICS building something, and India coming in. What their intention is, Aditya was a bit suspicious about it in his
yeah,
argument.
I
But
I
like,
I reckon India is the most passive player in this entire situation when it comes to BRICS. But when it comes to other BRIC countries, if you look at what they've carried out since this conflict began, you see what's happening in South Africa. They're very clear in the stance they're taking. Both Malema, the opposition leader, as well as the current person who's in charge, if you look at their statements, they're very pro-Russia and pro-China. And they're basically saying we're going to welcome them, we're not going to arrest them when the next BRICS summit take place. And America is not there. That's a very direct kind of a thing. South Africa, remember, is a BRICS member. Then you've got the Brazilians and the Argentinians. Argentina is not a direct member, but it's a player when it comes to BRICS. They've directly gone out. The new president has directly gone out, and they've made that statement that they're going to acquire the Falkland Islands again, which are under control of the British, and British consider them to be their sovereign territory. And that's the last conflict which occurred at the last time this happened. There was a war between Argentina and United Kingdom at the time of Margaret Thatcher, from which she basically got that statement, the Iron Lady, came because Iron Lady, that tag which she was bestowed with, was for that actual conflict, that the lady doesn't turn back. And then she went with the unions and stuff, but that's a conversation to discuss for another day. But having said that, all this has occurred in 1 week. So you can see that South America is directly involved and playing now, supporting the BRIC in that way, where they've directly gone out and made statements against them. And then you've got the African continent kind of emerging, and the main country over there, South Africa, clearly going against the West. Again, Saudi Arabia. If you look at Saudi Arabia has signed a deal with the Russians, even though they're a bit more passive, just like the Indians. But again, when it comes to oil, they're not going to care much about alliances, I guess. And Russia is making more money for them right now, and hence those policies. But when we look at the movement and the non-BRIC players in the entire situation, like Iran is directly involved now in this entire global conflict, where it's supplying artillery, it's supplying weaponry. It's now North Korea this week has done exactly the same. It's going to be supplying weaponry in exchange for food and further kind of development and more representation in global politics. Again, on behest of China, and soon to be on behest of Russia as well. So I kind of, based on all these things which I've stated, I believe that for the first time, in a long period of time, it's going to be a war between spheres. It doesn't necessarily have to be a direct physical war in all parts, but where needed, that's already started. The axis of different power gains in different power pockets around the globe has very directly begun. And we see diplomatic wars emerging. We see sanctions. Today's sanctions are very direct. China is not going to budge, but it's going to be interesting how these sanctions and these warnings are going to be taken by India. And again, with that, Aditya basically stating that he believes that it's just to weaken the BRIC countries. I don't see that in their interest. I would like Aditya to take over after you've said what you want to say in regards to this, and then we can also like add in Maham and Sid in the comments.
Yeah, just a small comment, Shaji. I think minus China, BRICS is nothing. Minus Russia, nothing. So there are two main players, and we have to realize that whatever the other countries are doing, they're still very small. If Pakistan gives a statement on international relations, you know what the perception would be, what the reception would be. of that statement. So I think the minor players, what they say are only just words and statements. Although yes, conflicts might sort of happen in certain regions, and they might escalate. But like if China is not taking uh, certain stern stances, or India, because it is also a major player, I would say, in BRICS. So there's no BRICS in essence, I would say, in terms of stance against the West, the G7, the USA. So yeah, Shaji, you're mute. I think Aditya, you were next.
I'm going to go to Aditya after I've made one comment. Don't you think same can be stated about the West? Minus the US. What is the West?
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Even
But
I
when
agree with you, Shah and Furkan bhai. Exactly, that is the point. What is NATO? It is America guaranteeing security to
Exactly.
Europeans. They can pretend they are equal partners, but they are not. They want to feel nice about themselves. They can say that we are equal partners, but it's America providing security to the Europeans at the end of the day. That's why when Donald Trump used to go to Europe, he used to somehow kind of force them into the idea of spending 2% for their military budget. It's like your boss giving you a task to get done by evening, right? It's the same. It was the same concept. It was America bullying the Europeans into spending 2% of their budget for the military. It wasn't for their own military. It was America asking for more money for the security they were providing to the Europeans. When we talk about like equal partners, do you think when after the Second World War, when America ensured America had foot on the on the ground in Japan or in South Korea, their people were working there. They had their army was stationed there. Do you think Japan and America are equal partners? Why don't the Japanese have stations military stations in the United States of America? Because they can't have that. That's not a partnership of equals. So that in the same way, you can talk a lot about what BRICS is, but at the end of the day, it's a group which is heavily controlled by will be influenced by China. India has some influence, but if you compare even we talk a lot about Russia, but Russia is not a superpower. The only superpower Russia is a military superpower. That's all. They have a lot of nukes. They have a lot of good weaponry, probably for their size. But it's not a superpower. It doesn't hold any economic value to anyone in the globe. What is the best thing that they export to the world? It's natural resources. Do they make any finished products? No, they don't. It's just an energy market for people. It can be easily replaced. If tomorrow in next 10 years, if enough countries start producing more renewable energy, they will run out of business to do in the next 10 years. That's why they are so dependent on China uh, for their future. So you can pretend that China and Russia are equal partners, but they are not.
But Aditya, do you realize the energy market also comes with certain amount of power, and India might not be dependent upon Russia for their power supply in the most it's not compulsory for India to buy from Russia. They can uh, have alternatives. But when it comes to EU, particularly Germany and United Kingdom, if, for example, the Russians were to turn the tap off, like, for example, they did, or they increased That's one of the sole reasons why the sanctions did not actually work on Russia, and the ruble initially plummeted, but how did it gain its value again? Instead of going down economically in this entire wartime with Ukraine, the Russian economy has sustained.
The reason the value of ruble for a limited period went up was because they don't have the SWIFT system. It's not even connected or linked to any international currency. So it's like, it's not a value is not determined by the free markets. The value is
What
determined
what I
by what the Russian government is willing to exchange your ruble for. For example, in like black market, ruble could be
no,
going for like,
when,
1,000 rubles for $100. Just an example.
hold on.
But if the state bank is giving me like 100 rubles for $100, that means it's exchangeable. It's just like, it's liquid. So that's what
Aditya,
determines the value.
hold on. What? Why the ruble did not fall, despite what you're saying, is because Europe had to basically go and purchase that energy. Whether it was the United Kingdom, Germany, or the rest of the continental Europe, they cannot afford to go without Russian gas. Utility bills at times went up by like 8 or 9 times, not even 8 or 9%, but 8 or 9 times. That a majority of it would not be incorrect to state it was the Europeans and the European Union and the UK who were like very directly uh, funding and making the Russian economy flourish in this time period. Sustain can be a good word, but at the end of the day, it would be very ingenuous of anyone to state that Russia is at least not a regional power, and not to forget the interest and the control Russia garners in Central Asia, leading all the way up till the borders of Afghanistan, where before they
Shah,
had
let
issues
me
with
let me
Iran,
give you
but
let's let's look at the power of let's look at the power of Russia in prospects, right? In comparison. Do you think other countries value as much if you look at their economy by the size of their GDP, or do you think there are other factors? Like, you can believe they are like, military power, and also they have like, a large piece of land. But if you just compare it, their GDP, the GDP is almost equivalent size of what Italy's GDP is. Do you think Italy matters in the global scenario as much as Russia do, or people think it does?
no, but I do believe that China coupled with Russia is very different compared to what the Western countries in recent times have faced. And with a combination of what is emerging, like almost like the pariah states, as we've heard growing up, and for majority of our adult lives, uh, Iran and North Korea coming into foreplay, countries like South Africa making a mark, and not to forget smaller countries kind of falling between those two things as well, those two sides. So I see that, at least I'm not saying that they will succeed, but this is a very, very, very significant threat to who is the top dog in global geopolitical scenario right now. This is a huge movement in terms of change in dynamics.
So, Shah, nobody is denying that we don't see global massive shift in the balance of the hegemony. There is no doubt China with its partners is like, rampantly evolving as a serious threat to the Western hegemony or the Western world order. Like in 1991, when USSR broke, people, like, there were postmodernists who said that, the world has decided that, democracy has won and free market capitalism is the final solution, and everybody came up with ideas that, more world trade and more, like, trading between the free markets will bring prosperity for all. There were postmodernists like, Fukuyama and all these people. They wrote theories, and let's be honest, like, the doomsday scenario guys and the, like, so hyperbolic, uh, like, ideas, they both were wrong. The arguments from both the sides came out to be
Aditya,
false, like,
those were political philosophies. We're talking about crude power shift.
yeah. So that's
They,
what my final argument is, that, but what we see today is China, along with, like, its partners, evolving, rapidly evolving as a serious threat to the Western world order. And if you
exactly.
look at, like, just clearly look at the influence of China in the, backyards of the United States of America. Look at, like, South America. South America's biggest trading partners is China. Look at Africa. Africa's biggest trading partner is China. Look at, like, many European countries biggest trading partner China. Australia's biggest trading partner is China. India's biggest trading partner is China, and ASEAN is totally dominated by China. So there are, like, many clear telltale signs that, this power, like, equation is shifting, but how fast it's shifting and how, in what sense and in what way it's shifting, is to be seen. And I think, like, people are overestimating the power of China. I don't think it's that strong.
I agreed with that notion in regards to that, but the access is there, and there are surges in various areas. With that, I think we should bring in Sid. Sid, what are your initial thoughts, and what do you how do you perceive this entire situation?
Thank you, Shaji. I would like to focus in regards to Russia in all of this is that even though the power shifts are trying to, occur, and all of these wars in various parts of the world are happening, we're forgetting the part where the whole Russian narrative is built upon right now on a 71-year-old man. We do not know of what is the second or established second after Putin. I mean, he's not going to live forever. The global shift would, I believe, will be more visible, will be more uh, solid after the fall of Putin. And I mean, just like any other man, he's a man. He will die. The future of the camps is going to be decided by the next in command or whoever takes the power. I mean, the history of Russian politics is when the king dies, they become like the Mongols. Uh, Everybody is fighting for every bit of power that they can grab. I think that would be the deciding factor because, as a matter of fact, the only countries or the only camps that are directly involving themselves against the Western power, and by Western power I mean the USA, uh, is Russia. China is much more inclined towards soft power. It's much more inclined towards economic uh, power and how they make themselves rooted in other countries' economies. USA is much more direct with physical power in that regard, and the only power that is standing against the USA in its complete hegemony is well, Russia. We're seeing that in Syria. We're seeing that in. We saw that in the whole Arab Spring. Uh, When it comes to China, the third main player, uh, I believe China is being more focused towards Africa rather than Asia when it comes to applying its soft power. So the global shift, I believe, would be more visible after the death of Putin. After all, he is 71 years old. How long is he going to reign? 5 more years at most? The dude's got to retire, dude. Either retire or die, and considering Russia probably die.
Can I ask you a question, Sid? Can you
Yes,
tell
sir.
me, like, in terms of a time spectrum, uh, do you see this conflict stopping in its track for 5 years? That you think that 5 years is going to be like 5 or 6 years whenever Putin leaves office, or according to you, he might die. Uh, Do you think this conflict is going to wait for that long? The amount of trigger points economically, as well as in terms of physical conflicts, allegiances, bans, embargoes, various countries getting in with the action, various disputes emerging in all major continents and countries. Do you even believe that this is going to last for 5 years? Do you think that there are 5 years in terms of time spectrum that you can have the liberty, or nothing's going to happen in the next 5 years?
Uh, Throughout the history of human beings, there's one thing that we uh, have made sure of. We are very resilient as a species. So I do believe that as bad, as gruesome as all the situations that we are looking at, and I mean, Palestinians more than anyone have proven it in the modern times. Yeah, we're going to survive. The conflict's going nowhere.
My
That's our
question
human condition.
my question is not survival. I'm saying what the aggression from Russia and China is going to wait. Do you think specifically Russia's aggression is going to wait for 5 years? They've already in the last 12 years, if you look at it, they've gone out in Crimea. They've taken over Crimea. They're reconnecting countries like Belarus and whatnot, expanding as a regional power. They're telling countries around their neighborhood who can join NATO and who cannot join NATO. They've threatened Poland into submission in terms of conducting certain economic things within their own country. And this is all recent. This is last 10 years. Everyone knows what they've gone right into Ukraine. From the interview, there was a very interesting interview just conducted last week, and I think we should speak a bit about that as well. Conducted by an American journalist called Carlson. I'm sure everyone's at least seen bits and pieces of that because it's a very interesting kind of thing. If you look at it, the first half of history, which a lot of people are basically stating should have been something which Carlson should have not uh, let occur. But it's very interesting monologue, which Putin goes on for almost 1 hour and 13 minutes, in which he explains almost 1,000-year history of how and why all these lands belong to Russia, and how Ukraine and Ukrainians don't even exist, and how he's going to very quickly capture all those lands for his people, and how he's going to conduct that. And he was very calm about that. So,
Yeah,
if
it's
for
only reasonable
no,
that he
no,
would
that's
do that.
not the question if it's reasonable or not. That's not why I'm bringing that to your attention. The reason why I'm bringing this to your attention is once Ukraine is under control, which it very much is, the maximum today, Russians will be laughing that they were bestowed with sanctions before, nothing happened. Now they've gone out and done what they've done. They've just gotten rid of the biggest opposition leader in the country, which many people are saying the regime did it, namely Putin did it. But the fact of the matter is, whether he did it or not, with the kind of stuff which he's saying, the kind of threats Russia has made to Poland, I think it's now a possibility. Ukraine is just the first country they've gone into. Who's next? If you're giving 5 more years before he's going to die, he would have done half of Europe by then.
If I may, Sid, if I may, Shadi,
Yes, yes,
you
yes.
you're right in that approach. What Russia is taking, I totally agree. But we also have to see what the countermeasures are being taken by the U.S. They have a strong presence in the Middle East. They have a strong presence in the Europe. We don't have to say that. And also, like in South Asia, if we talk about the region, Pakistan as an ally, we started off with discussing how Khan was, uh, what happened with Khan and where he is. They have a strong ally as Pakistan in that region as well. So I think the countermeasures that are being taken, and also I would say, because there was a comment probably made by you, uh, what presence Russia has in the Central Asian countries up till the border of Afghanistan, reinstating Taliban there. The last time Russians tried to do something further than that border, Talibans were there. So they're still there, reinstating Taliban there, having a presence in Pakistan. So they're also quite
Uh,
proactive, I would say, in a way
Mahdi,
to counter all these measures that you just said.
Dr. Furqan, my point over here is not that if they're going to succeed or not. My point over here at this moment in time is not that which side is going to succeed over the other. What I'm trying to highlight, all these countermeasures actually make my opinion stronger in terms of that case, that we are on a cusp of conflicts which are going to be uh, occurring all around the globe. And behind that is going to be the reasoning of either you are in the Sino-stroke Russian sphere or the Anglo sphere, or more appropriately, America and its allies, or are you going to be with China stroke Russia kind of a situation? And right now, all the countries look at Saudi Arabia, for example. Saudi Arabia, with all the requirements which United States, West, and India and all those countries have, and they're supposed to be a Western ally, right? Uh, Agreed with Russia to cut oil supply. So, and what that in turn has done has surged the price of oil by in double digits, and they've agreed to extend that, and they've been doing that since December. That's an official deal between Saudi Arabia and Russia. America, as well as Europe and India, and because that skyrocketed the oil prices in the last few months, just in the last couple of months. So Saudi Arabia is another country which is on a pendulum of trying to balance things, where again it is not sure with MBS like character in charge these days. He is not sure which side to go on. And that scares the West, that Saudi Arabia might end up on the other side because it's showing those glimpses. India might be considered passive, but again, India has been acting very clever. It's playing its cards very, very quietly, if you think about it. And the West does not have that guarantee anymore. They do not
Shadi,
have
don't
that.
you think?
Hold on.
w-
They don't have that guarantee that India is definitely going to be on their side. That's the thing.
would
That
you not consider, Shaji, the possibility of new spheres building up, considering what's going on in Africa, uh, what is going on in Middle East? I mean, it has got to end somewhere, and I mean,
Mm.
the pot is not going to keep on boiling. It's going to end, and considering the situation not that far
can you
away.
can you repeat the first half of what you said? You got cut out. I think I have.
I said, would you not consider the possibilities of new spheres emerging? For quite some times, the spheres have been the Sinosphere, the Russian sphere, and the Anglo-Saxon Anglosphere. Don't you think there's a
What
possibility?
years are you talking about?
Well, uh, Africa could make its own sphere. There are some very powerful individuals coming out of Africa. uh, MBS retaliating against the Western interest and not completely going on towards them or Russia, even though it has a deal with Russia, it also has deals with the Western world, uh,
Yeah,
and
but
it's not
it's
a weak
passive
country.
there because of their economic conditions. They're still a passive player. They're a secondary player.
Yes, they are passive right now. They are passive in that particular the fight between those two spheres. In their own
They're, they're,
region, they
they're,
are the
they're,
main player.
how are they with the main player? What impact, global impact, can South
No, no,
Africa,
no. In their
Nigeria?
own region, in the Middle East, the
No, we're
main
talking
player.
about the global hegemony, Sid. We're not just talking
No,
about
yeah,
the
and in
region.
the global
And
hegemony,
they are a
if
very important region, and there are regional players over there, namely Nigeria, South Africa, Zimbabwe happens to be one. Burkina Faso is basically the new kid on the block when it comes to Africa. Uh, yes, they have a huge impact. Yes, they are making a mark, but I don't see an African country becoming a global superpower, at least for the foreseeable future. It might be a possibility, everything is one, but
I
I
mean,
don't see
I
them
would consider it
replacing
a
China.
possibility. Yes.
I don't see them replacing China, United States, the United Kingdom, or I don't even think they're close to that. If you would have said India or some other country, maybe it would have been more plausible. But I don't think the economic condition and the environment is in favor of the Africans at this moment in time to even attempt to do that.
I
But
think
anyway,
in global politics, the effects or the political power, I believe that can change a little bit. And considering the fight between the two spheres, the Russian and the American sphere, has taken quite a toll on the whole of the world. And the way that all the smaller players are trying their very best to remain neutral, I believe that this might end up in a situation where new spheres emerge, where smaller countries, smaller players end up in a situation where they say, we don't want to play it with you anymore. So, yeah. As for the Russian aggression happening, like I
so
said,
do you believe that if smaller countries say we're not going to like oblige to either side, uh, they're going to be uninvolved?
they're going to be acting more in self interest, especially considering the kind of political leaders that are emerging from Africa. Uh,
So,
I think they are going to be
so do you
more.
think that regime change on behest of global powers won't occur in those countries like it occurred in Pakistan?
Pakistan is a country that is filled with
So
self-rule.
I'll give you an example from Africa. So there's a very large country which we've all heard of, or for all the wrong and incorrect reasons, Ethiopia. Now, Ethiopia is connected in terms of border with a country called Atrisha or Atrasia. I keep forgetting.
Atrasia,
Yeah,
Atrasia.
yeah. Atricia or Atricia, different people pronounce it in a different way, but anyhow, right? So that country again has sided on the lines of South Africa as well as everyone else, and they tried to act neutral. And what attritions did when the new government came, they sent the Americans out. They had an American base over there. So they told the Americans to basically leave their country and diminish their base, and that's what they did. So the Americans are now supporting the Ethiopians to go and invade them
All right.
because so the fact of the matter is that there is a conflict. So there's a price to pay for situations like this. This is why at the time of global conflict, usually countries do take and pick sides because they're forced to. Either they're attacked by one side to be forced into something, and as a result, they automatically seek refuge from the opposition. For a good example would be North Korea has been completely ignored by a majority of the Western countries, and on behest of them by people who are associated to them. But all of a sudden, they've made a reemergence in global politics in a very direct way on behest of China and Russia. So they've had to pick a side. Even a country like North Korea, even though it has always been very close to China, but they've picked a side very, very clearly. So I do not believe there is actually going to be any countries who happen to be either on the crossroads of different borders or strategically involved will have options to stay out.
I mean,
Because
situations, I believe, especially with the kind of countries are in Africa. I mean, I'm reminded of what happened in Rwanda. Uh, I believe they do have the potential to seek out of warfare. I believe that
what happened in
considering
Rwanda said,
oh, a complete bloodbath, but all
yeah,
of a
what
sudden,
Rwanda,
all of a
which
sudden, yes,
are you stating they became free from conflict?
actually, yes,
Have you
right
recent
now.
have you recently checked what's happening in Rwanda?
Well, no, not recently, but 5 years ago
I
when my
think you
father,
need to I, I think you need to update yourself. What's
boy,
occurring in
are they
Rwanda?
back on killing each other again, the Hutsi and the Tutus?
It's more. It's not only that, but the two sides have now chosen in terms of if they're going to be more NATO backed or are they going to be more kind of Russia or the new emerging order backed. So I
They
think
have stopped killing
African
each other.
politics is very, very interesting. They're very, very, Somalia is another country. They're very, very clearly and very directly supporting the likes of Malema and Ibrahim Terror of Burkina Faso, and a lot of issues like that, and a lot of dialogues are emerging out of Rwanda as well. Not just Rwanda, but Somalia as well as um, Nigeria, Kenya.
Yes,
All
all of
those.
these scenarios that you're telling me is them
I'm talking about
denying the,
conflicts. I'm talking
you're
about
talking.
conflicts. I'm talking about direct threats. I'm talking about unrest in that continent. I'm talking about people dying. It's
Yeah,
already begun. So I don't think where there's so much conflict, which has all of a sudden triggered, where they were till 6 months ago, they were relatively peaceful as a continent in those terms, and in 6 months. There are revolutions occurring there. There are people killing each other. There are coups happening. Burkina Faso has seen 2 coups, coup and then a coup on the army by a personnel. Terror made a coup on an army general. So,
yeah.
so what you're seeing is nothing. So your main assumption was that these countries or smaller countries will remain out of conflict, but it seems like smaller countries don't have a choice, in my opinion. But you might have a different
No,
opinion.
I think that if that is the scenario, then the resolution to all of those problems would be to stay out of the fights of the larger spheres. If these countries want to develop, the only way is to act out of the interests of the larger spheres and
Uh,
act more in self interest, especially considering what has happened in
I think
Pakistan.
you're
The
going.
establishment sold out.
Sid, I think you're going ahead of the conversation. We're not at the stage where we're asking if what they should do in terms of resolution. What we're discussing is how the axis of power is emerging in different pockets in different parts of the world where various conflicts are breaking out, and they're all on behest of a few power pockets, and the hegemony who in terms of who's going to lead the world is kind of right in the forefront. Who's going to win it? Should it happen? Should it not happen? Is a very
Well,
much later
as
thing.
for should it happen, I mean, come on.
We're not at that.
These largest spheres are just uh, playing with thousands of lives. Uh, Basically, the blood of these people is on their hands.
But we're
Uh,
not at that stage to discuss that. We're not discussing their morality. We're
no,
discussing what's.
as well, if we're discussing if it is
I
happening,
take your point. I
yes, it
take your
is.
point. I take your point. That's how you feel. That's fine. But yeah, coming back to the subject, fair enough. Furkan, you had something to say, and Maham, please pitch in. Furkan, are you there? I think we've lost Furkan. Maybe a connection issue.
Yeah, sorry, there was an issue with the connection. Jishan, yes.
Yeah, so you've heard what Sid said. He doesn't think it's morally correct, which is fine and well. But do you see these conflicts which are emerging? Do you believe that any smaller countries or have choice of not being part of this larger conflict? Is there?
Usually they don't have. Usually they don't have a choice. And why I say this is because in terms of economics, yes, Russia can be all right with 500 sanctions coming their way. They have their economy quite internally. It's not reliant on what happens outside of Russia. You can be okay with 500 sanctions, but if such sanctions comes like towards a country like Pakistan, okay, so it's going to be devastating for the already crumbling economy, and also the countries in Africa, also the other small countries. I think while choosing a side, these maneuvers are used by the West, by the USA, and they are quite effective, I would say. For Russia, sanctions 500,000, 15,000, 15,000, a million sanctions, it doesn't matter. We have seen like the sanctions were there when they started invading Ukraine. They didn't stop. Their economy didn't crumble. You guys were talking about ruble and the value and all a few like 20-30 minutes back. I think for the smaller countries, they use economics and sanctions as the major intervention they have while picking or choosing sides. IMF, again, might be impartial on paper, but again, the major player is, again, America. So, yeah, Shaji, over to you.
Yeah. So again, so you think it's just in terms of embargoes, or it can have some serious consequences for a country not choosing one side over the other?
I think economics play a major role, but because there were certain leaders who would, like Kim, like Putin, they don't care about the embargoes or the sanctions. There were some leaders in the Middle East, also sometime back in Pakistan. They were removed quite effectively by the West, I would say. So the new leaders coming in are like even MBS. You said there might be a shift or a tilt towards the East, but I think he is also quite inclined towards the economy. In terms of what I have heard, uh, what he stands for in terms of listening to a few interviews, I think he's quite open towards bringing new ideas to Saudi and uh, turning it into an economy like Dubai or even Europe, because that would be something good for the Middle East, the region, I would say. So he's quite open talking about economics and how to make Middle East great again. I don't know, but yeah, I think economics would play a major role in choosing sides for these small players in the global geopolitical situation that is occurring right now.
Interesting. So do you think there's this perception almost like which I think is usually there, like people begin to assume or under a lot of thing, and I'm not saying that to anyone on the panel at all, but everyone's entitled to hold that opinion. That opinion is that for some reason there's this belief within the Western world, like I'm British, you're German, as well as the indigenous people, that because maybe we've not seen a world where there there has been somebody else in power, that we think this is how it's set in stone, that this is never, this hegemony is not going to take a shift, and some countries are passive. I think if we look at the longer history, what we'll find is that all emerging powers, or whenever there is a power shift, it it never kind of takes place without huge amounts of conflict. It never has done. It's always like people think that there happen to be a huge array of people who go out and think that China is just magically economically going to take US over, and it's going to become the main top dog, and it's going to be without a drop of blood. the Chinese, the way they're building their navy bases and their air bases around the globe, and what they're doing in South China Sea, and why they're constructing that one road, one belt initiative, and the way they're making allegiances with countries as far as like countries which were like designated pariah states like Iran and North Korea, and countries like the Nigerian countries where they've, sorry, African countries where they've gone into. I think they've already shown aggression, and they've shown that they're not going to shy away from aggression. And obviously, if you look, another hotspot which is very quickly developing is basically Singapore. I'm saying Singapore. It's Taiwan, where the Americans have assured the Taiwanese people that if China was to attack them and take over, which is claimed to be Chinese sovereign territory, they're going to defend them. So again, the Chinese are making threats very outrightly that if that's what US will do, and this has also like taken up heat this week. It's very interesting, and then you've got a statement from the British government that if this is how China is going to behave, then we can reclaim Hong Kong. Do you realize that's not over yet? And just in recent times, I think it was 3 or 4 years back, and they've reiterated that and reminded that to China. Lord Cameron, who's like almost like a prime minister to the UK right now, completely overshadowing Sunak on the global front, at least. What you've seen is that he very clearly mentioned that we provided nationalities to everyone who's a Hong Kong national overnight. And it would not be under Geneva Convention or any kind of restriction if you have a large number of your citizens in a country which is attacking you or something. You can go and rescue them, and you can help fight for their freedom and whatnot and protection. And in this case, Hong Kong still technically belongs to us. It's not entirely given back to you. So you're hearing statements like these coming out, gestures, diplomatic things in relations to that. It's very different from how people perceive that it's going to be a bloodless thing. It's not going to occur in that way, and one country is just going to take it over. How do you see that moving forward? Do you think? Why do you think people think that China is not going to come out and attack, and it's not in their bone when what they're showing is something completely opposite? And why do people think that there is a possibility that such a power struggle, even if carried out by the West, might just be bloodless? And after you've answered that question, I would like Sid to answer that as well.
Okay, thank you, Shaji. I think most of what you said, I agree. One correction, I'm still a Pakistani. Yeah, but I think until and unless China comes in uh, overtly, because right now it's operating very covertly in international affairs, I would say. In regional affairs, yes, it's very open and overtly. Like you mentioned, Taiwan, they exert their power. They exert that they have power. But that's not the case when it comes to global uh, uh, geopolitics. they try to maneuver small players in and let them sort of do their job. They had a strong ally in the region. And when the regime change operation, as it is labeled as in Pakistan, they didn't even sort of gave a strong statement or anything. And it's quite clear that it actually happened. So the power shift or the inclination of Pakistan while choosing a side when that was happening, they were shush. So until and unless they are covert in terms of what is happening in the international West and how they are exerting their power, I don't think anyone would be taking uh, China that seriously. Yes, Americans are taking them seriously since quite some time, and that is why they're still there. But like, I don't see the power dynamics changing anytime soon. And China also knows, I think, what their place is, I would say. So that's why they are operating mostly covertly in different areas for Taiwan and regional certain things, probably
Don't you
covertly.
think that that would have been a more correct statement 6 months ago with the kind of conflicts which you've just seen in the last 6 months? The kind of movement China also knows this is their only chance to get a shot out at being the global leaders, because give it 10 years or 5 years and they don't try it, then their fate is over, because what the United States and the West is doing very successfully is something known as deployment of decoupling when it comes to China. And that is a very direct threat to the Chinese. And in terms of beneficiaries of that, those companies being decoupled in terms of manufacturing and developed or researched within China, or Chinese products facing embargoes in various ways and restrictions, which Huawei is a very good example to look at in the recent years. The 5G infrastructure, which they were about to conduct for most of the EU, was very harshly taken apart
Mm.
by United Kingdom and various other places at a great loss. So I don't believe that if China has even been left with an option, they give it another 5 years, they won't have a market.
I
They
agree.
won't have a market.
And I agree to that notion. And they also probably know that.
So do
That's
you
why
think?
that's
So
why they're operating a bit covertly, I
so
would
so,
say.
so, so do you think they're going to back down without a
Yeah.
fight? Without a fight?
No. They would be operating
Mm,
like covertly. That's what they're doing since long, and they would be doing that using certain players. Uh, yeah, and then they would keep on doing that. But until and unless they would be coming in like like international players like Russia, North Korea, if they are not like taking stances like how they did, because the 5G deal, that was a major blowback also to a certain extent to their IT industry, because Huawei is still the major player in uh, like people know like Huawei is like a mobile manufacturer who basically probably disappeared. Still, phones are available, but their major infrastructure and like what they produced was the infrastructure for 4G and 5G, which was coming in. And during Trump time, what happened with them? Uh, It was a major blow, and it was also a certain mm, like like the Americans told, pack your bags, go back. It would take more time for us to produce the infrastructure for 5G, but we don't want you to make the big bucks. So initially, I agreed to the point like minus. Shadi, one point. I agreed to one of your points, and now I might retract my agreement that minus America, the rest of the West is nothing. It is in terms of economy because like when the 5G like deal happened, the Europeans also said, "Get out. We won't be doing any business with
So,
you."
so
So
that's exactly.
in terms of that, like I think minus
I,
America, the G7 as a collection is huge.
now, what I want to point out is that was now you've not disagreed with me, but now you're on the same page and you've agreed with me. And I think the same applies to the other side. The only reason why you see this direct conflict is because China on its own was never enough, and Russia on its own was never enough. But when you look at Russia, North Korea, China, Iran, Nigeria, South Africa, Argentina, it's a very different story all of a sudden. It's a very impactful story all of a sudden. It's a very direct threat. And other countries like Saudi Arabia, India, Brazil, still not showing their cards. With them on that side, if that was to happen and the way they're playing and they've not made it obvious to the United States and its allies, it becomes a very different story. Almost like an equivalent threat. And that's
Economic, and I think as well as
mm,
the war and the regional disturbances, because
mm.
I think economic warfare is also a major sort of a card that
And
from.
hence the smaller countries now, why I have that opinion, and like you agreed upon that as well, uh, uh, will not have the option of choosing a side or not choosing a side. They're automatically going to be fit into that. If they're a strategic country, they can't remain neutral unless it's an imperative state and a very unique situation. Some countries might end up being that, but they'll be very rare. Maybe majority of the globe will have to pick a side
Mhm.
if that was to happen. So
Yeah, I think we should move towards final remarks, Shaji.
I think we should give Sid an opportunity to
Yeah.
also like pitch in his idea. Does he believe in terms of the bloodshed? And then we'll just go for a close.
As for the bloodshed, Shaji, it's already happening. It's not a question of will it happen, it is already happening. Uh, in the Middle East, uh, even in Africa, in some places, uh, the unrests as a result of these global spheres trying to exert their powers, they are happening. So the shift from the global power of the West towards China, if that happens, it's not going to be bloodless, of course, but if it is done in the favor of China, the bloodshed is not going to be direct. It is going to be in smaller pockets here and there because the interest of China is much more exerted towards uh, the economic situations, whereas if it falls towards the Western power, it would be a much bloodier scenario because the interests of America are much more inclined towards political unrests in the countries where they exert their power. It is in the interests of the Western powers that the countries that they exert power into are in a constant state of unrest. Otherwise, uh, they do not exert their power properly. For China, uh, they require a much more stable situation to exert their power because they are more interested in economic power. Uh, if the country is economically defaulting, well, they can't particularly do much. So it's in the interest of the Sinosphere that the countries that they exert their power into uh, are relatively better compared to what the interests of the Western power is. So yeah, that's my ending remarks on that. The
Okay,
bloodshed is already happening.
thank you very much. Go ahead, Furkan. Furkan, Dr. Furkan. Dr. Furkan. Are you alive? Dr. Furkan has lost connection again. Dr. Furkan, are you there? Am I audible? Can someone tell me?
Yes, you're audible, Shaji. I think Dr. Furkan has a problem on his side.
I think
Uh,
he has a.
Sorry. Yeah, I think there's a problem with like my connection today. Yeah.
Maybe
So
Russian intervention into Germany and they're like not wanting you to speak your mind. He's
freely.
been.
Okay. Uh huh. But like yeah, we have Vodafone. I think it's quite British as well. So yeah, but like yeah, uh, coming. So it's the closing remarks. I would only say like I don't see any change in the global sphere happening in terms of power shift in the near future. Uh, America has been exerting their will, what they wanted, since the past 3, 4, 5 decades, and they would keep on doing that. And they have a very strong bloc and a strong cohort of allies. And I think the other side is still relying on the small players to do their bit, and the major players, when it comes to like taking stances, they go numb and shush. So until unless they don't come up openly, like Russia and North Korea, I don't see a threat to the current world order. Thank you, Shaji.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to try and keep it short. That's your opinion. I think when it comes to the resultant of if the global shift is going to occur or it's not going to occur, is anybody's guess right now. And I do not believe in complete verdicts. But I think this is an interesting situation developing in terms of geopolitics, and hence we've started this stream in terms of access. And in the coming events, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be sharing uh, various aspects of these things and how they're connected in more detail. Hopefully, in beginning from the interview of Putin in greater details and how it's been taken and what have been the ramifications, moving on to what China is doing and what's occurring around the globe. With that, I think rather than passing verdicts and taking obvious sides, my intention in these conversations is going to be more in terms of analysis of what's actually occurring, where it will be interesting to hear verdicts from various people and how they believe, because both approaches are fine. There's nothing wrong with either approach. But just to state that, and I hope there occur some very heated conversations. Today was just a base in regards to where we're headed in terms of detail politics. And with that, I'll like to pass the mic on to Maham, who can give her statement in regards to that. She didn't speak much
Can I
today.
make a small comment in a bit of jest?
Sure.
You sounded like the bricks, taking both sides, saying nothing. Sorry.
No, actually,
Yeah.
it's very good that you stated that. So that's not what I was trying to bring forward. So what I want to concentrate in these conversations is going to be on the fact that what Russia is doing, what their strategy is, what the American rebuts are, not in regards to who is going to win, but in terms of what the fight is going to be upon, what the struggles are going to be, what one side is doing and what the other side is doing in terms of its counter, and more reading in terms of what is brilliant by those sides in regards to that, and we'll see little outcomes come out of that. And I think that's a different approach, but yeah, it's not passive.
It's nice. And you were very clear the first time. It was just a joke, Shaji.
No, it's fine. It might be a joke from your side, but somebody
Yeah.
listening,
Yeah.
the opportunity to clarify that so they don't
Fair
get
enough. Yeah. Yeah.
any mistake. Again, like one more point, like the UK is another topic I would like to bring in further conversations, because we've almost got a foreign minister who's acting like a prime minister and he's not even elected. So again,
Uh, okay.
go ahead,
Thank you so
Mohammed.
much. Uh, I think I heard Furkan Bhai saying that, the hegemonies will not change or something. At some point, it's going to change. The greatest empires in the world, they all fell at some point. The Genghis Khan's empire, it ended. The Roman Empire, it ended. The Greek Empire, it ended. Mesopotamian Empire ended. The all of these empires, they have at some point gone through their demise. And I think at some point, as far as I've read, it was going to be 2025, but that's too close. There is going to be a certain demise of certain hegemony, or we might get two different hegemonies. We would never know. But the situation will keep going on. So if for that very reason, we have started this segment, Access, where we will be discussing hegemony, the changing superpowers, and the hegemony politics, and of course proxy wars. So subscribe the channel, press the bell button so that you get regular updates, and thank you for listening. Have a nice day or evening, afternoon, wherever you are. I'm going to end the stream now. Thank you so much. Goodbye.